Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Inept General bringing you another Total War Warhammer 3 Legendary Lord lore video, and today we will be looking at Skarbrand, the Drinker of Blood, the Wrathful Reaper, the Exiled One. Once the greatest of all of Khorne's demons, an eternity of battle had brought Skarbrand innumerable victories, all in the Blood God's name. It was he who tore down the gates of Slaanesh's first palace and visited great ruin therein. It was he who led the 8 hosts of murder to their triumph over the combined armies of the other Chaos gods long ago. No other had piled so many skulls before the Skull Throne, or spilled the blood of so many warriors and innocents alike. Thus did Skarbrand enjoy Khorne's favours like no other, an honour which would lead to his downfall. For even demons are not immune to hubris, and Skarbrand's pride grew with each of his countless victories. Tzeentch could sense Skarbrand wanted more. He sought the honour and worship that belonged to his lord, and so the great sorcerer whispered in the mighty demon's ear, until a plan formed in his mind to overthrow his master. For he was Skarbrand, the mightiest of demons. He had toppled cities with a single blow, and surely none, even Khorne, could stand against him. In the brass citadel, Skarbrand stood at Khorne's side as his position of honor dictated. And on this dark day, when Khorne's back was turned, Skarbrand's fierce pride grew hot, and blinded by rage he smote the Blood God with as mighty a blow as he could muster. But even mighty Skarbrand could not pierce Khorne's brazen armor. A small chink into the Blood God's armor was all he had to show for his efforts. As Khorne turned to face his servant, Skarbrand saw a terrible fury in Khorne's gaze. Incandescent with wrath, Khorne seized Skarbrand by the throat and choked all personality from him, leaving behind only the bottomless rage that Skarbrand had felt at the moment of his attack. Khorne carried Skarbrand up to the tallest tower of the Citadel of Brass and hurled the demon deep into the realm of chaos, banishing him. For 8 days and nights, Skarbrand plummeted down towards the earth, a fiery comet of ill omen streaking across the unchanging sky. When he finally made landfall, he struck with such force he gouged a canyon in the landscape, and his own wings were left tattered and torn. Now, his mind frozen in the moment of rage-filled betrayal, Skarbrand has become wrath incarnate, a restless fury that cannot be stopped. Whether he treads, order and discipline are replaced by anarchy and bloodlust. Fast friends and firm allies have been known to tear each other apart, falling to Skarbrand's emanating madness. As was the case in Caranage and Ghul. But before we can tell you Skarbrand's role in the events that occurred there, allow me to set the scene. A grey seer by the name of Thanquol, legendary to us as Warhammer fans, but also pretty well known within Skavendom itself, had been tasked with recovering the magical artifact known as the Hand of Vectic, which was known to be able to boost one's magical powers. Now, through a series of narrow escapes and misadventures and an encounter with Ikit Claw, he managed to get hold of the artifact, but was now faced with a furious Queek Headtaker, who had room on his trophy rack for another skull, as he blamed Thanquol for being part of the crimes against his clan, who had a holding of the Undercity of Bonestash, which lay underneath the dwarven hold of Caranage and Ghul. Thanquol, in a feat of begging and perhaps one could even say Skaven charisma, managed to not be another head added to the trophy rack of Queek Headtaker, but instead promised the warlord great power with his new magical artifact, and so Queek allowed him to join his army as they marched against the dwarves of Caranage and Ghul in order to take over the dwarf holding entirely. Thanquol, now marching along with Queek's army, was surprised by a host of dwarves appearing at their rear, and now facing enemies in front of them and behind. Queek found Thanquol in the melee and forced him to use his powers to turn the tide. Thanquol, now armed with this magical artifact, was sure he could summon a vermin lord to fight by the Skaven's side and defeat the dwarves. But just as he tapped into the magical energies of the Hand of Vectek, he was assaulted by a series of visions. He saw visions of a Skaven, lost and abandoned by the entirety of Skavendom to die alone in these forgotten caverns. There, the Skaven swore vengeance against his kin, and proceeded to eat the original Hand of Vectek, only to absorb its power, chop off his own hand, and scroll a hidden symbol into it. It was this hand that Thanquol now held, not the original, and upon turning the hand over and seeing the hidden sigil, he saw the sign of Khorne. But by now it was too late. He had already tapped into the magic energies of this realm and summoned forth a mighty shadow, the shadow of Skarbrand himself. As Thanquol's magical energies began to wrap around this shadow, Skarbrand began to take form, and Thanquol could hear the thoughts of the greater demon in his mind, sensing the rage, in particular the rage at Thanquol. How dare this rat magic thing have the audacity to summon Skarbrand? He would claim its skull and the skulls of all on this battlefield in the name of Khorne. By this time, his immense hooves had begun to materialize as he set about crushing all those underfoot into a gory pace. Despite this terrifying new presence on the battlefield, the Skaven and the dwarves still set about killing each other. The spilled blood only fueling Skarbrand's emergence as he began to rain down blows with his twin axes, Slaughter and Carnage, each of which contained the bloodthirster's savage spirit, cutting bloody canyons of gore in dwarf and Skaven ranks alike. Scared for his life, unable to teleport due to being completely drained of his magics, and surrounded by dwarves, Thanquol scurried off to hide. Queek, for his part, for a brief instant, thinks of challenging the greater demon, but soon comes to his senses, and in the face of this slaughter, ordered a retreat of the Skaven. But the dwarves were not done with the rat things. As they felt their hatred for these vile creatures grow inside of them, they proceeded to cut them down as they fled. The bloodlust taking hold of some dwarves so badly that they began to strike out at their comrades as Skarbrand's madness began to seep into them. Only small pockets of dwarves in the middle of the fighting were immune to Skarbrand's effect, and that was only those who happened to be near runesmiths at the time, who were able to ward off the effects of this madness. As the slaughter of the battlefield descended into a bloodbath, some of the dwarves noticed the carnage was only strengthening the demon. Orders were sent out through the dwarven ranks to allow the Skaven to pass, which in some areas of the battlefield happened, but in others, who had by now lost all reason, it was too late. This bit of reprieve in the dwarven onslaught, however, did allow Queek to escape, and as he did so, he swore vengeance upon Grey Seer Thanquol, who he blamed for this debacle. Those dwarves in the middle of the fighting, with no more Skaven to set their axes upon, started fighting one another. However, further afield, with the Skaven dealt with, the dwarven artillery was able to concentrate their fire on the emerging threat of Skarbrand. The artillery barrage, however, seemed to have little, if any, effect on this demon. One dwarf, however, by the name of Karlak Bronzehammer, happened to notice something, however. The demon did seem to be taking damage on the part of his body that was nearest to a great statue of the dwarven ancestor god Valeha. Seeing this, the brave dwarf ran towards the statue, for he had a theory that whatever ancient runes had been carved on this statue, they were having an effect on the horror in their midst. He fought his way through the chaos of battle, picking up some artillery charges en route until he got to the base of the statue and started to climb. All the while, Skarbrand's rampage continued. Growing stronger by the second, his tortured roars echoed around the battlefield. Bronzehammer eventually reached the arm of the statue, which was gripping a mighty axe, and carefully placed blasting charges around it. Carefully calculating, with the precision only a dwarven master engineer could muster, he blew the charges as the arm blew away from the statue. The huge stone axe falling square in the middle of Skarbrand's head, banishing him from the mortal realm. Almost immediately, the heads of the Dawi began to clear, and the fighting ceased, and the cheers went up for Bronzehammer, still atop the great statue. Little did he know, Thanquol had cowered behind the statue as the fighting had worsened, and in a sheer act of spite, having now recovered some of his magical energies, launched a bolt of warp lightning at Bronzehammer, who came crashing down to the floor, dead. And then Thanquol skitter-leaped or teleported away to get into trouble elsewhere in the Warhammer world. This is but one example of the kind of savagery Skarbrand can unleash on the mortal realms, for in all of history, there have been none to serve the Lord of Skulls so completely. He has taken mountains of skulls and filled vast oceans with gore. He has shaken the foundation of eternity with his wrath, drowning his sins in the blood of the slain, though he no longer has the wit to understand why. Khorne, for his part, refuses to rescind his decree, as there is little regret in the blood god's black heart, for Skarbrand in tortured exile serves him better than ever. And that is how we find Skarbrand as we go into Total War Warhammer 3. He will be the legendary lord for the demonic factions of Khorne, leading his horde of demons into battles with all in the mortal realms. In terms of his rules back in the day on the tabletop in 8th edition, he had Frenzy, magic resistance. He caused terror because he is terrifying. His tattered wings meant that he couldn't fly, unlike other Bloodthirsters. He also had Bellow of Endless Fury, which was basically meant he had a breath weapon, which we hopefully will see implemented in Total War Warhammer. He had another rule called Rage Embodied. That meant he gave the Hatred special rule to both ally units and enemy units, all of them on the battlefield. And it meant that he couldn't lose his Frenzy ability at any point in the battle. He also had his two axes, Slaughter and Caranage, who I mentioned earlier, are imbued with two spirits of Bloodthirsters who are trapped within them. And these basically meant that they were magic weapons, and no one would have any kind of armor save against them if they managed to hit. That's how Skarbrand played on the tabletop, and I can't wait to get my hands on him in Total War Warhammer 3. He will bring true slaughter to the battlefield. But for now, that is where his story ends. And if you're interested in knowing a bit more about what exactly was going on in Caracan Ghul with Thanquol, Ikit Claw, and Queek, do take a look at my videos on Ikit and Queek in the top right hand corner, or you'll find the links down in the description below. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to catch you all on the next one. Alright guys, bye.
Blood for the blood god! Skulls for the